Hello, I'm Nicola Pomponio, your host for the Gloria Ferrer webinar. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to be able to virtually travel to California, which I actually am in California. Today we will talk about the first sparkling house in Sonoma. Direct from Carneros, we are live at Gloria Ferrer with our winemaker Steve Urberg and general manager Mayacamas Olds. Steve, go ahead.
Well, thanks for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to get together with you guys this nice Friday morning to talk about our wines and our estate here. Good morning to start tasting at 9 a.m. A little bit about me. I've been with the wineries for quite some time. First time I was at Gloria Ferrer was back in 1995. Worked a harvest here, fell in love with making sparkling wine. After that harvest, worked a few other places, but in 2001, when an opportunity came up to come back to Gloria Ferrer, I jumped at the chance, came back in 01, and have been here ever since. And love being here and love the estate.
Mayacamas?
And I'm Mayacamas Olds. I'm the general manager for Gloria Ferrer. I am the newbie on the team. I started in February of this year. My history in the valley and wine country in general is long. I was born and raised on Mount Veeder, on my family's property, where we grow and make Zinfandel. I've worked in the wine industry all my career, all over the world, doing all different sorts of things, and I'm super excited and completely honored to be running a place such as Gloria that has such amazing history.
Speaking of history, we're going to jump right into our questions, Mayacamas. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of Gloria Ferrer?
So Gloria Ferrer has a pretty unique history. It was the first sparkling house really to go up in Carneros. It was a lifelong dream of the Ferrer family to create a traditional method sparkling house in California, and they had been looking for a long time. And when Jose and Gloria Ferrer first came to Sonoma Valley in the 1980s, they got super excited. They had found a place that had the ideal Mediterranean climate to grow Pinot and Chardonnay for sparkling wine. They found sloping hills, a maritime influence that was very reminiscent of Catalonia, where they came from. And they instantly fell in love with the place. The culture of Sonoma Valley also is based on Spanish missionaries who came and first settled there in the 1820s. So the culture also was very welcoming to them and their family. So they bought the place in 1982. And started designing the winery and putting the place together. The winery and the brand is kind of founded on strong female leadership. So in honor of Gloria Ferrer and her inputs into the winery, they named the winery after her. And the first person that they hired to come work for the winery was Eileen Crane. She came and put the winery together and built it and really got that Carneros-driven style in place to that Steve has taken on and everybody else has taken on. Pedro Ferrer, who I believe everybody on this call knows, is second generation. He came to California in about 1983 and worked on and off at the winery from 1983 to 1994. And of course, he's still involved with the brand, but from his home in Spain. One of the things that the winery was really founded on was kind of generational continuity, as well as like long-term sustainability. They really wanted to make wines that would sustain the land, sustain the community, and have a style that was good for generations. And we've been true to that. The wines have remained quite true to the Carneros terroir and the lands they come from. And just as an example, we have many examples, but we have Mike Crumley, who runs the vineyards, who has been there since 1986, I believe, and Stephen, of course, has been there on and off since 1995. So we're doing everything we can to stay true to the founding legacy and our terroir at the property.
That's great. That's an interesting look on the history of Gloria Ferrer. I love the story. Tell us exactly, where is Gloria Ferrer located?
So Gloria Ferrer is located at the base of the Sonoma Mountains in Wildcat Peak. This really protects us from the strongest of the Carneros winds. It does not, of course, protect us from all of the winds, but the site in southern Carneros, they're protected from a little bit of the winds. The base of the mountains, where the alluvial soils wash down off the hill, really create a very unique soil type for us. And it creates the perfect growing conditions to create beautiful sparkling wines. It gives us a long season. We get lots of morning fog that helps cool everything off during the days, so we don't get some of those really high temperatures you need for red wines. But it's perfect for sparkling wine, perfect for Chardonnay and Pinot. And the winery is situated in an ideal place. We are at the gateway to the San Pablo Bay, to the San Francisco Bay Area, and to wine country. So we're one of the first parts of call to either welcome people to wine country or send them home kind of rejuvenated after a really nice afternoon or a couple hours, enjoying the sunshine, getting to sit on the terrace and enjoy our wine.
We definitely do welcome people in. Every time I drive down 37, I see that billboard, Gloria Ferrer, and I'm just very proud to see that we're telling everybody, hey, when you're entering Sonoma, come see us. And boy, what a beautiful place to see. Steve, tell us a little bit about the varietals that are grown on the property.
Three of the items that really make our wine special here at Gloria Ferrer are where we're located, as Mayacamas was describing, in the westernmost edge of the Carneros region, southern end of Sonoma County. Very cool area, perfect for growing our cool climate varieties, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And then the grapes that we grow here. So we've been growing Pinot Noir on our estate here since the early 1980s. So after 30 some, getting close to 40 years now of growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on this site, we've learned a lot about it. In addition, back in the late 1980s, Bob Iantasca and Mike Crumley went to Champaign and visited with folks there and managed to convince them to allow us to bring back 13 of their most important Champagne Pinot Noir clones and some Chardonnay clones as well. And we brought all of those clones back, imported them through quarantine, and made them available to the rest of the grape growing community as well. But we also did a bunch of research on that and looking at these important Champagne clones, looking at how they performed in our soils here, in our climate here in California, to determine what are the best clones of Pinot that we can use for making sparkling wine on our site right here. And through the last few decades, we've had the opportunity to evaluate these things, look at the different clones in different locations on our estate, all of our different little microclimates, and make really the right choices in terms of figuring out which clones are performing the best and what site, what exact spot on our estate vineyard that they perform the best. And through that, we've been able to get the perfect match for clones and site. And when we have the best location to put the grapes in the ground and then pick the best grapes suited to that site, we're the next step is just to try to find the best expression of that fruit into our wines.
It's great to be able to go out and sell the wines and tell the story. And telling the story about the clippings from Champagne is huge. I think that is such a great selling point, and not only a selling point, but just a great fact that we were the ones that did it. We were the ones that brought the clippings to UC Davis. We did all of the studies on them, and because of someone's idea that we have these fantastic vines now. It's an amazing story. So tell me a little bit about how the wines are made there.
Well, the next facet of what makes Gloria Ferrer sparkling wine so special, starting with the location, we're in the perfect spot to grow these varieties, and then number two, choosing the right clones, getting the right grapes in the right spot. And then number three is how we make the wine. And how we make the wine at Gloria Ferrer is with the traditional Champagne method, what we used to call méthode champenoise, but to not use the word champagne, we're now using méthode traditionnelle. But that's still the traditional method of bottle fermentation to make sparkling wine that is age-old and well-tested, and is really the best high-quality way to produce sparkling wines, especially right here in this region. And it's a long process. It's very complicated, a lot more so than making still wine. But it begins before harvest, when we're monitoring the fruit in the vineyard, looking at the maturity, the progress of the grapes developing. as we approach harvest. And we're going to pick the fruit for sparkling wine. We pick it at an earlier maturity than we would for still wine. For still wine, it gets a little bit riper, and if we're going to bring the sparkling fruit in less ripe, and less ripe means it's got a higher acid and a lower sugar to the fruit. So bringing the stuff in a little bit before the still wine harvest, we're going to get out there and we're going to pick all of the fruit at night. Now, where we are close to the ocean here means that even if we do get hot days, if we get 95 degrees plus in the daytime, we still get that maritime influence every night where the cool air comes in off the ocean that blows in on the wind and cools everything down. So by the time we get in the middle of the night, even if we're in the 90s in the daytime, we're in the 50s at night. So all of that fruit in the vineyard gets cooled off into the 50s, and we'll get our guys out there at 2 a.m. and we're picking fruit in the nice cool air. And that means the fruit coming off the grapevines is nice and cold. All of our fruit is completely hand harvested into small bins. So we'll take this cold fruit that we've picked from the grapevines, bring it into our winery, and we'll press it away very quickly and gently. The reason we're doing that is we're a Pinot Noir driven house. Of the 335 acres we have planted on our estate, it's about 75% Pinot Noir, and we have a lot of Pinot Noir in a lot of our blends. But of course, our sparkling wines they're white wines. They're not red wines. And if we're making white wines from red fruit, we need to produce the juice in a different manner than we would with red. So to that end, we're going to get the juice away from the skins and seeds as quickly and gently as possible. In the skins of the Pinot Noir grape, all of the color is living, and tannins and textures and a lot of characters that really make still Pinot Noir wine so wonderful. The stuff we love in the red wine just doesn't belong in the sparkling wine. So we want to get that juice away from those skins without extracting that material. So we'll take those whole clusters of fruit, no destemming, the whole cluster goes in, stems and all, no crushing, we won't break those berries. We'll go into our presses that have a large bladder, like a giant balloon that will gently squeeze those grapes and push the juice away from the skins. That cold juice saves us some energy. We don't have to cool the juice down if it comes in at 55 degrees to start with. And also the cold juice is less likely to extract anything from the skins that we don't want. So now we've got our white juice from our red grapes, keeping every individual vineyard block, every lot separate. Then we're going to inoculate with yeast. Yeast goes into the juice, eats the sugar in the juice and makes carbon dioxide and makes alcohol. So for the first time we're fermenting, we're essentially making a still wine. It'll be in a stainless steel tank, and we leave the top of the tank open. So all of the alcohol stays in the wine, but all of the CO2 is going out of the top of the tank. So at the end of harvest, we'll have a whole bunch of tanks of high acid, low alcohol base wines that will blend back to make our cuvées for all of our final sparkling wine. So once we've got all of the cuvées produced, then is the magical part. This is the traditional method where we start to put the bubbles in the wine. So at this point, we're going to inoculate back with a yeast culture a second time. So we fermented the wine once, but we're going to ferment it a second time. So we put yeast back into the wine. We give it a little bit of food to eat too. So then we have a tank of actively fermenting wine. So the yeast is in there eating sugar and making CO2 and alcohol. When it's in the tank, it's going out of the top. But then we're going to bottle the wine. We're going to bottle that actively fermenting wine into the champagne bottle, sparkling bottle, and close that bottle with a crown cap. So this is where we're going to ferment the wine in the bottle. That wine is going to get fermented in that bottle. So with the crown cap, just like on a beer bottle, that's going to hold all of the CO2 that's evolving from this secondary fermentation. It's going to hold it in the bottle, it dissolves in the wine, and that becomes our bubbles. And we're going to lay that bottle down. It takes about 6 weeks to ferment. And once it finishes fermenting, we've got our bubbles in the wine, and that yeast just kind of falls to the side. And we're going to age that wine on the yeast for anywhere from 2 to 9 years. And I can show you a little example here of, you can see here, this is a bottle after it's been fermented and it's aging. So you can see the yeast sitting on the side of the bottle there. So during this period of time, that yeast is aging in there and improving the wine. And when it's time to sell the wine, clearly we're not going to sell it with a crown cap and a bunch of yeast in it. Next step is to get the yeast back out of the bottle. So we will riddle the wine, and that's the act of taking the bottle from on its side like that one and tilting it upside down and getting all of that yeast down into the neck. And once upon a time that was done all by hand, but now we have machines that help us out with it. But you can see in this bottle here, the little right in the cap, that there's a little pile of yeast in there. So once the bottle is riddled, all of that yeast has moved down into the tip of the bottle. We call that on point, and we're almost ready to take the next stage. So with this bottle on point that has been riddled, we're going to take and dip this in a machine that has cold liquid, only about 1 inch in there, and that 1 inch of wine in the tip of the bottle is going to freeze solid into a block of ice on the inside of the bottle. We can then turn the bottle upright. The wine goes to the bottom of the bottle. Ice stays in the neck. And when we take off that bottle cap, the pressure in the bottle pushes the ice out. And along with the ice comes all of that yeast. We've removed the yeast from the bottle without removing the wine. We'll go back in at that point with a little bit of dosage to bring the wine into balance. Put a cork in it, put a wire hood on it, dress it up with a capsule and a label, and then it's good to ship to the marketplace.
And it's time to drink. That's great, Steve. Thanks for really being detailed in terms of how champagne is made. I know we can't walk with you into the production area, but when I was with you yesterday and we were kind of going over this, it was just, I thought it was great for you just to do a step-by-step, and you really nailed it. That was perfect. Mayacamas, you mentioned there was, what did they use? Did they use something different before the crown cap?
Yeah, I don't know what year the crown caps came into being, but before then they used to use these funny little pieces of cork.
Huh, interesting. Well, cool. Let's jump in and taste some wines together. Steve, let's go ahead and pour some Sonoma Brut, and why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
All right.
And if anyone has any questions, there's a few questions that have come in. I'll be throwing out some questions to both Mayacamas and Steve as we go. So please go ahead and put them into the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so Sonoma Brut, this is a Pinot Noir driven blend. It's about 88% Pinot Noir, 12% Chardonnay. And really shows a lot of these Pinot Noir characters that we like. So you get that little bit of black fruit, black cherry all the way in the background there. And then on top of that, we've got green apple, some citrus, a little bit of citrus zest to it. Continuing on with that green apple all the way into the long finish too.
Steve, I had a question about yeast. Do you select indigenous yeast, or do you actually select the yeast, correct?
No, we're using the same yeast that we've used. There's a couple of different times that you use yeast. So remember I talked about the primary fermentation. That's where you would use a commercial yeast. And for sparkling wines, pretty much everybody uses the same choice of yeast, maybe produced by a different company, but the same yeast, commercial yeast for the primary fermentation. But for the secondary fermentation, we've got a special yeast. So the Ferrer family has isolated several strains of yeast. They've been working with secondary fermentations for more than 100 years over in Spain, and have done a lot of research on yeast and have isolated some very special yeasts there. So we use a special yeast that they've identified that works extremely well for the secondary fermentation. The secondary fermentation is so important that every single bottle finishes fermentation and finishes evenly and doesn't have any strange characters. It's a very demanding environment for the secondary fermentation. You're developing greater than 90 pounds per square inch in the bottle. You're asking a lot out of that yeast, and we don't want it to get stressed out and do anything strange, and we want it to come back out of the bottle when we riddle it. So we have a proprietary yeast strain that came over from Spain that we've been using. We maintain it in our micro laboratory here, and every year when it's time to start bottling, we're going to take just a tiny slant of that one tiny culture and build it up from essentially a single cell into a colony, and then that colony we're going to build up into several thousand gallons of yeast culture that we're going to use for our secondary fermentation. So our yeast selection for the secondary fermentation is very important, and we've got a very special tool that we were able to get from the Ferrers.
Let's go ahead and jump into the Carneros Cuvée.
Okay. That Sonoma Brut's great. Really showcasing those Pinot Noir characters.
It's beautiful.
And, you know, on that Sonoma Brut also, with that 12% of Chardonnay in there, brightens it up a little bit. You know, the Chardonnay characters, a little bit different than the Pinot. In the Carneros Cuvée, however, we're looking at 55% Pinot, 45% Chardonnay. So this is a wine that's had greater than 8 years of aging on the yeast. Sonoma Brut, give it a couple years, 24 plus months aging on the yeast. But for the Carneros Cuvée, we're going to give it, for these vintages right here, where we've been at 8 or 9 years of aging on the yeast. And during that time, you saw the yeast in the bottom of the bottle. It's not just sitting in there taking up space. It's doing work. It's given up carbohydrates. It's given up colloids. It's giving you mouthfeel, stabilizing the mousse, making tiny bubbles, and also it's contributing that little bit of toasty brioche character. And somehow the Chardonnay brings that out a little more than the Pinot does. But that's one of those really nice things that we get out of Chardonnay and out of the yeast with the Chardonnay. And during that time, the yeast is protecting the wine, slowing the oxidation, slowing the maturity of it. So for this wine, now a 10-year-old wine, showing extremely youthful, just barely beginning to give us the beginnings of some mature character to it.
You're tasting
a lot of this nice.
Right?
I'm sorry?
You're tasting the 2010?
2010, yes.
Yeah.
But the 2010 Carneros.
We still have a little bit of the older vintages in the market, but it's great to hear about what's up and coming here, the 2010 vintage.
Yeah, there's still some 07 and 08 out there. And those are showing absolutely beautifully also. This is a wine that was blended. It was built for aging. So with all of that extra Chardonnay in there, we're able to bring that pH down nice and low, bring that extra acid in there, and also choosing the lots that are going to go in there that are going to have the right structure for aging to show well after this great length of time. So a wine that's built for the long haul, and really right now just barely showing the mature character. And if you like more mature character, you can let it age for another few years on the cork. You know, as it gets more time on the cork, the maturity accelerates a little bit after it comes off of the yeast. So if you like a more mature wine, you can do that. But this is showing beautifully with stone fruit and some red apple, and
it's super creamy. It's very
nice
rich.
Mineral character. It's got that wonderful toastiness in there too from the yeast age, and even like I'd say a little zing of ginger on the finish.
Everybody take notes.
I really love this wine.
I do too. That's a fantastic wine. What do you think, Mayacamas? As soon as, and I have you ask a question as soon as you put the glass to your lips, so I apologize.
It's definitely one of my favorites. I love Chardonnay bait. I'm a Blanc de Blanc girl for the most part, but I really like wines like this that have that much age and character to them. And I think that's one of the things that makes Gloria amazing is we have some of the best well-aged, put together wines that hold up for the long term, because this wine will still be beautiful for another 8 to 10 years. Like, it's going to be fine in the bottle unless it's stored in the sun or something like that. But
It's amazing
gorgeous.
the complexity of this wine. It really open. You really taste these nuances that you don't expect. Like you mentioned, red apple, and there's just so many beautiful nuances. And this is a wine that we don't show as often as we like to, but this is something that after this webinar, I would love our sales team to show this wine, because this wine deserves a place everywhere, whether it be in the on-premise or in the off-premise. There's opportunities to show how Sonoma wines can age and how we can show them in this stellar bottle. And by the way, we've come up to our 30 minutes. I can't believe how quickly that went. So if you do have to move on to something else, viewers, please go ahead. But we're going to move into our question and answer. So if you can stay, please stay with us. We're going to go into a few questions that we had. First off, speaking of the bottle of Carneros Cuvée, where did this bottle shape come from? I think, Steve, you mentioned you knew where that came from.
This is a proprietary bottle design. So we had a local design firm create the design for us. We own the molds to it. We're the only people that can use this bottle. We've been using it since 1995 on this blend. It's a very special bottle, and a very special wine deserves to have the very special bottle. It's a very labor-intensive bottle. All of the work on this bottle needs to be done by hand. So we put a lot of hand work, we put a lot of love into each one of these bottles to really showcase the wine that's on the inside.
We have a question about reserve wines, base wines. Can you tell us a little bit about the base wines and the age of them?
That's not a real quick topic, but to cut it short is that we've got excellent weather here in California, and we've got very consistent ripening of our fruit. So from year to year, we've got very consistent wines, and we don't really have the need to blend wines across vintages to get consistency. So we typically, on any given year, will bottle the entire vintage at once without holding reserves across vintages to blend out. If you're in an area where you don't have the kind of consistent weather and you don't have, and your base wines aren't as consistent from year to year, holding reserve wines and blending across vintages is the way that you make a more consistent product.
That makes sense, and I'm sure you could probably get into like a half an hour explanation on that. So we might just shoot you an email for a little bit more information.
Trying to keep that one brief for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Everybody does. Someone asked about why the house is Pinot dominant rather than Chardonnay dominant. Is that and can you do that in a nutshell as well, or is that another email question?
That's where we started, and there's so much more variety in Pinot Noir clones than there is in Chardonnay clones. Pinot's a very, very old variety, and for some reason it seems to have a greater propensity to mutate. So over the years, there have been more selections of different Pinot Noir clones than Chardonnay. And among the Pinot Noir clones that have been selected, there's a much greater diversity of character amongst them also, which just makes it absolutely fascinating. And the texture of Pinot Noir is just wonderful for sparkling wine. In addition, it's a whole lot of fun to make still wines out of Pinot too. So we started out as a Pinot-driven house, and we've been driving Pinot ever since.
That's great. Mayacamas, you've been with Gloria Ferrer for a short time, and welcome, by the way. Tell me, is there a wine that stands out for you there? Maybe you can tell me which one was your favorite. You did mention what type of palate that you have and what you like, but is there anything that stands out?
I love the Extra Brut. I'm a champagne snob. I came from a place where I had, for the last 15 years, access to Krug whenever I wanted it. And I feel that our Extra Brut, our Blanc de Blanc, and our Carneros Cuvées really kind of have that same essence and quality-driven piece that fit the style that I like. I always try and be really clear with everybody that just because that's the style I like, a lot of people prefer the Pinot-based wines because they have a little bit more to them, and they're a little less acidic. Where I love acidity and creaminess, so that's why I gravitate to those wines. Definitely a personal choice. My father would completely disagree and go the completely opposite way. So, but definitely those three are my favorites.
Thank God we all have different palates, or else we'd all be drinking one type of wine. So
Which would be boring as all get out.
yeah, that's right. We have quite a palette of wines to taste from at Gloria Ferrer. I appreciate both of you for your time this morning. So much, there's so many questions that we can probably be here for the next half an hour. But we do appreciate your time, and I know that the winery is going to be opening on Sunday, so there's plenty of work to be done. Mayacamas, Steve, thank you so much for your time. Steve, I'm going to give it to you, and then Mayacamas to close.
Well, thanks again for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to talk about how we're making wine here and talk about our wines and to start tasting at 9 a.m. on a Friday.
It's a good start to a Friday. Thank you everybody for having us. And I want to say that we are opening on Sunday. It's a very soft opening and the team has been working unbelievably hard at getting ready for the opening while the production team has just been moving fast paced since we opened back up almost over a month ago now for production. And I want to welcome you guys back to the winery. If you want to come see us, we will be taking reservations as of Monday for the public. It's at a very scaled down, about a third of our normal seating. So things will be very different for the foreseeable future, but we're making everybody safe and look forward to things getting back to being slightly more on a more normal pace for everybody. So thank you for having us.
Thanks again, everyone, and cheers, and have a great Friday.
Cheers, you guys.